OBS Studio is an awesome piece of software. I use it all the time. In fact, I'm using it right now to make this video. And it's been a huge value to me in making my channel and my shows and all of that sort of stuff. But there's some interesting news going around right now related to OBS and the Fedora Linux distro. You could call it a bit of a kerfuffle if you wanted to, because the OBS team are not happy with some stuff that the Fedora team did regarding OBS and Flatpaks. In fact, they said if something didn't change, OBS would look into taking legal action against Fedora. For those unfamiliar, unlike traditional package managers like RPM and Deb, Flatpaks allow software to be distributed in a more universal way. The most popular source for Flatpaks is the Flathub, which is where the OBS Studio team maintains an official Flatpak. However, Fedora runs its own Flatpak repository, packaging software independently instead of relying on the Flathub. For a lot of different Flatpaks, this seems to be totally fine. But for OBS, it's a little different. This led to an issue that OBS has with Fedora, and Fedora's version of the OBS Flatpak turned out to have some problems. Users started submitting bug reports, and since Fedora's Flatpak isn't labeled clearly as a separate package, complaints flooded upstream to the OBS team directly. On January 25th, Joel Bethke, I probably said that wrong, sorry if I did, from the OBS team filed an issue on Fedora's GitLab calling out Fedora's broken Flatpak and requesting that it either be removed or explicitly labeled as a third-party package. He was particularly frustrated that Fedora had taken a functioning Flatpak, repackaged it, and pushed it with a higher priority than the official one, and it seems to be having some issues. This sparked wider discussions within Fedora's Workstation Working Group about how Fedora prioritizes different package sources. For example, should Fedora Flatpaks be deprioritized in favor of the Flathub? Should users have more clarity in their software sources? And should Fedora even be maintaining separate Flatpaks in the first place? All of these were discussed. Then things escalated. On February 12th, Joel responded again, and this time issuing a formal request for Fedora to remove all OBS branding from their distribution, including logos and names. If Fedora failed to comply, he warned that legal action might follow, giving them a deadline of February 21st. Now, since the legal threat happened, Fedora has responded, and they have set the OBS Flatpak for their OBS Flatpak to be end of life, and it's on track for removal. It's possible if they can fix some issues and talk with OBS that they might want to bring it back in the future, but for now it is set for end of life. Now, there have been some videos and articles published talking about this, but to clarify something, based on my research, the actions taken by Fedora happened prior to the coverage starting, so the end of lifing for their Flatpak was before any of the videos and podcasts and stuff came out talking about it. So that's just a little bit of information about it's not because of the backlash, they were already planning to do it. So that's the overview of what happened. And it's a pretty interesting topic. That's why I wanted to cover it in this video. I'm going to go much more in depth than just that. That was just the overview. But I think it's an interesting topic to talk about because there was a lot of kerfuffle that happened from it, as well as there's some interesting questions that arise from this particular topic, such as whether or not the Fedora Flatpaks repo should even exist at all. There are a lot of people asking that question. So let's dive in. Let's go back to the issue filed by Joel on January 25th that was titled Broken OBS Studio Flatpak Presented as Official Package. It says that the unofficial OBS Studio Flatpak on Fedora Flatpaks is seemingly poor packaged and broken, leading to users complaining upstream thinking they are being served the official package. There are several examples of this being the case outside of OBS Studio as well, and many users who are unhappy with Fedora Flatpaks being pushed with no or unclear options to opt out. We would like to request this package is either removed or made clear that it is a third-party package. It should not be upstream's responsibility to ensure downstream packages are working, especially when they overwrite official packages. I would also like some sort of explanation on why someone thought it was a good idea to take a Flatpak that was working perfectly fine, break it, publish it with a higher priority to our official builds. We spent an enormous amount of effort on our official Flatpak published to Flathub to ensure everything is working as well as it can be. Diving deeper into the discussion they had related to deprioritizing or removing Fedora Flatpaks, we've received complaints from multiple upstream developers, most recently from OBS Studio regarding users experiencing quality issues when using Fedora's Flatpak apps. This is because of the order of precedence in GNOME software. Fedora Flatpaks, Fedora RPMs, Flathub. Unfortunately, Fedora Flatpaks have been a significant source of quality problems and have frankly been generally unsuccessful. Fedora Flatpaks are not well tested, and users who understand what they are generally do not want to use them. They want to use higher quality Flatpaks created by upstream instead, but most users don't even realize they are getting a Flatpak from Fedora rather than from upstream, which can result in a considerable confusion. This person says that I want to completely change the precedence of GNOME software to Flathub, then Fedora Flatpaks, or then Fedora RPMs. However, FESCO approved inclusion of Flathub on the condition that it is the lowest priority source, so we would want to go through the change proposal process to propose changing this. So they have offered two alternatives, though we'll follow up with a third one. The first alternative said Fedora RPMs, then Fedora Flatpaks, then the Flathub. But then they say that this is not desirable because it underestimates the importance of Flatpak sandboxing and prevents us from ever reaching our desktop security goals. Then he says, I will write some blog post about this eventually. Alternative number 2 is just remove Fedora Flatpak remote by default. However, we really do need Fedora Flatpaks for at least GNOME core applications to implement, so this would not be an ideal outcome. But perhaps we could create some Flatpak remotes for pre-installed Flatpaks versus everything else. Now, I just want to clarify that a lot of the conversation happening in this thread is from people who are sharing their opinions, and they're not talking on behalf of Fedora. It's developers in Fedora having a conversation. And this is one of the topics that I wanted to talk about in this video. Having your discussions in the public means that the public can see it and therefore criticize the comments said by the developers. And this is both great in the grand scheme of having the information and being able to act upon that information and that sort of stuff. But also it creates a little bit of a potential drama bomb, basically, like this is happening because the whole thing has already been addressed prior to any of the news coverage happening. So I'm covering it again to give more details about what's going on and talking about the Fedora Flatpaks and why they exist and all that sort of stuff. But if the news didn't happen, then I wouldn't be making this video. And also, I wouldn't have known about what the Fedora Flatpaks system repo is really for because this happened and then I dug in and started doing research. So I guess there's that benefit. But anyway, my whole point is here to say that just because someone has an opinion doesn't mean that they represent Fedora's opinion. It's not like the collective opinion. So there we go. Including this particular person because they're saying that Fedora Flatpaks have a significant source of quality problems and have been generally unsuccessful and they're not well tested, even though other people in the Fedora are saying the opposite, that it has been well tested and there are a lot of benefits from it. So, take that as you will. Another developer offered a different alternative, saying that they could make it user configurable like how Plasma Discover does. And in my opinion, this is probably the best option because it's a compromise saying that the Fedora Flatpaks will be by default, but if someone wants to choose to change it to Flathub, that they can. And GNOME software doesn't seem like they can do that right now, whereas you can in Plasma Discover. So the Fedora KDE edition can do that, but GNOME software doesn't seem to be having that option. The next person says, I disagree with the assertions that Fedora Flatpaks have been a significant source of quality problems and that the Flathub Flatpaks are always higher quality. A lot of work has gone into these. Fixes have been applied as issues have been brought to my attention and further improvements are soon on the way. Many of these complaints would apply equally to the RPMs. I see this as no different than Bottle's fiasco from earlier. If software is FOSS, then by definition we must have the right to redistribute it as we please, and upstreams cannot restrict that and remain FOSS. As such, I don't think we should need to entertain any such request by upstream to not distribute their software in whichever form it may be. The point about how it's not always higher quality on Flathub and it's also there's not significant source of quality problems, that this is an opinion-based thing. And I have used Fedora Flatpaks and they worked fine. I've used Flathub Flatpaks and they've worked fine. And there's some issues depending on the software you use for any kind of packaging. There's no perfect solution for every type of application. So there are definitely going to be times where some things work better than others and that sort of stuff. So I do think it's fair to say that I think the original post is saying that it's always higher quality or that there's been a significant source of quality problems. I think there's a little bit more to it than that. And as for the RPMs thing, This is an interesting point because there was an RPM issue with the bottles thing. So now that they make it only possible to use in Flatpaks, so the only way you can use bottles is through Flatpaks because they wanted to have the sandboxing and that sort of stuff. So it's understandable that that's the idea. And if the RPM does not offer the service, the features that they want to have, then I could see why they would not be happy with this. But I also agree with this person saying that they don't need to entertain the request because downstreaming is a thing that is provided by FOSS. However, there is a nuance here because if something is broken for the user, it doesn't matter if the downstream has the right to do it or not, because you should be making stuff for the user to have a good experience. If they're not having a good experience, well, then that's the reason you don't do it. However, on the original post from Joel, it talks about like the options that they're asking for is not just removal. They're saying that it's either removed or made clear that it's a third-party package. And I think this is solvable by having like a Fedora Flatpak tag that's just next to the Flatpak in the software store, or something that's like packaged by Fedora, something like that. I think that would solve it probably, because then you're clearly stating that it's not the official version in that sense. The quote further reads, based on what I've seen in discussions along these lines, what we have is a new era in which upstreams now believe that thanks to Flathub, etc., they don't need distributions anymore for their software to reach users, no longer see the value in distributions, and simply wish to cut out the middleman entirely. However, that does not give them the right or power to do so. Now, this is interesting because it's true that they can still package it if they want to because they've released it as FOSS. And I do think that there is an element where the official package is more sought after by the users because they're expecting the people who maintain the official package to put more effort into testing and all of that sort of stuff. And so they're assuming that the best option is going to be the officially maintained option. And for the most part, that's probably true in most cases. Not every case, probably, but most cases. Now, in the case of OBS, it does seem to be that the more functional and stable version is the Flathub one maintained by OBS, but there is an asterisk attached to that to say that it's not exactly perfect. So we'll get to that in a second. He says that in his opinion, they were correct to put the Flathub as the lowest priority, as we have no control over what goes into them and their packaging standards are low, inconsistent, or non-existent. That's not to say that there isn't useful content there, but priority should be definitely given to our own builds. Now, this is interesting because I kind of agree with this, because having no control over what goes into the repository that you're providing the users does create a bit of an issue. So, for example, if you are giving full access to Flathub, then you are causing a potential issue that if something goes in there that's not necessarily just proprietary, but something that's, accidentally malicious that gets through, then if the Flathub is fully accessible that way up front, then it could cause an issue. I'm not saying that OBS is that, but I'm saying that is a potential argument to say that's why they would need the Fedora Flatpaks. So I do understand why they would want to make their own Flatpak repo, and also why they would put it priority, because there are times where it might be better for them to do that. However, when bugs and issues arise and the other option is clearly the better option, then I would prefer that they'd be able to make a tweak somewhere saying this particular Flatpak would have the Flathub as a default. The next person says to bring up an example of a problem which only affected users of the Fedora Flatpak, but not the upstream Flathub Flatpak. They said that a bug in the RPM packaging meant that the runtime image loader's dependency of Fractal was missing from the specs, possibly due to the packager not looking closely enough at dependency changes when handling a version bump. This issue probably wasn't found during testing because all the testers had Loop installed on their system, which caused the image loaders to be available because they already had it there. However, the Fedora Flatpak build of Fractal installed a minimal set of dependencies, and so it was missing the image loaders. The Fedora Flatpak was apparently not properly tested in this instance and was released with a significant bug where it could not display images. The upstream Flatpak on Flathub was properly tested by the developers and included all the components needed for correct functionality. This is something that can happen. for sure. I agree. But also because the dependency changes happened doesn't necessarily mean that it was a bad test. It's a test that didn't have every configuration, and maybe more people testing would be better that in that sense, because they might not have loop installed. But that doesn't mean that they didn't try to test it and that sort of stuff. So I don't think that's a fair assessment exactly. But that's also the original poster came back and said that this is a great example of breakage caused by the Fedora Flatpak, although it was also pretty easy to fix. I think the although it was pretty easy to fix is kind of understated here. It's pretty easy to fix, so it's not that fair in the sense of saying that it's a full breakage. It's more of like, oh, well, oops, let's fix it. You know, the original poster also goes on to add an alternative 4 and an alternative 5 saying verified Flathubs, then Fedora Flatpaks, then Fedora RPMs, and then unverified Flathub. Then they said another alternative would be Fedora verified Flathub, Fedora Flatpak, unverified Flathub, and then Fedora RPM. Now, personally, I think my ideal solution would be something like number 4-ish. So, for example, I would say Fedora Flatpak first, then the verified Flathub, then the Fedora RPM, and the unverified Flathub at that point. But I would also give a preferable ideal solution would be to have the ability to put an asterisk next to things that are saying that the clear better option is the verified Flathub. This is not necessarily these two things are not necessarily bad solutions. I think that there's validity here in both of them, but there is something that's important to note. Verified Flathub does not mean official Flatpak. It does not mean that it's maintained officially by the project. It also means that someone could be sanctioned officially by the project to maintain it for them, which is a little weird. OBS Studio is a great example of having an official Flatpak being maintained by the official project on the Flathub and it being verified. As you can see right here, it's verified. Now, this whole by the OBS project is kind of confusing to people because it makes them think that the Flatpak is being maintained by them, but it just means that this is software created by this project or this company or whatever. So this is actually not important to talk about in terms of like whether it's official or not, only this part. And actually not even this, it's just this checkbox. However, that checkbox does not mean exactly what most people think it means. Most people think that it means it's an officially maintained package. And that's not exactly correct. Now, yes, it does mean that, but it also means that the ownership of the app, the Flatpak ID, has been verified using the domain. Now, what does that mean? It means two things. One, that it's officially maintained Flatpak, and then two, with the example of Obsidian, which is a verified app, that it is officially sanctioned by someone in the project for someone else to build. So this is technically a third-party package on the Flathub, but the Obsidian team have sanctioned the people who are making that as officially recognizing it, but it's not maintained by Obsidian themselves. So that still counts as verified, which is one of the reasons this is causing confusion in terms of whether something is verified or not. So essentially, verified means officially maintained and officially sanctioned, so not necessarily always officially maintained. Personally, I don't really like the fact that there's a confusion between what verified means. Verified is supposed to mean what people think it means, which is officially maintained packages, but it also means officially sanctioned packages, which I would prefer to have something else that indicates that, having two different versions, one being an officially maintained and one being maintained by someone who has been sanctioned by the project or whatever. But that's where we are right now. The next poster says, Fedora Flatpak advocates can push the idea that our way is good, developers are wrong, we should fully exercise our rights as open source licenses give us. Absolutely, they say, but that doesn't mean it's a good idea. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. That's the old adage. And they say that Fedora Flatpaks do not get nearly enough testing to justify shipping them, and the lack of working with upstream developers is part of the entire reason Flatpaks exist in the first place. Now, this line right here is usually solid. Just because you can doesn't mean you should applies to a lot of things. And in some people's opinion, I could see why that you wouldn't like it. And also, the part of the entire reason Flatpaks exist in the first place. Now, this part about fragmentation, that isn't necessarily why, but it is in a way. The main reason that Flatpaks exist is because the traditional formats, the RPMs, the debs, they have to be built multiple different versions for multiple different distros, and even multiple different versions for the same distro depending on the version of the distro. The main reason is because it's a lot of work to package an application in Linux back in the day. It was a lot of work. I remember being part of a project where we made an app, and in order to have support for Fedora, for Arch, for Ubuntu, Debian, SUSE, that required over 20 packages just for one release. That's a lot of packages, and we didn't have like a really big project. It wasn't a huge app. So the more complex the application is and the more complicated the packaging is, then it could be even worse of a process. That's why the universal formats exist, in my opinion, because it just gets rid of a lot of that headache. Now, not all of it, because there's the snaps and then there's the Flatpaks and there's the app images, but 3 is still better than dozens of packages. So they go on to say fragmentation is not something to be taken lightly. I agree with that very much. Then they say if Fedora doesn't have a reason for Flatpaks other than we're allowed to do this, I don't believe Fedora Flatpaks are justified. Arguing that Flathub is supposedly not up to par in terms of software review is a horrible argument to use because filtering Fedora to allow verified Flatpaks by default rather than just Flathub as a whole can be a pretty reasonable result out of this. So I agree that could be a reasonable result, but why do they exist? Why does Fedora Flatpaks exist? Let's talk about that. So Fedora Flatpaks exists for several reasons. They ensure all software meets Fedora's content policies. They support architectures that the Flathub does not. This is also a case of the x86 version is the x86-64 is the only version that the OBS team has in the Flathub. So if you were using an ARM system, you wouldn't be able to have it anyway, whereas you would be able to do things with OBS with the Fedora Flatpak because it supports that and more. Fedora Atomic desktop variants also need legally compliant preloaded applications. So this has to come from Fedora's own repositories. So if they want to have preloaded applications in Fedora Atomic desktop variants, then they have to use the Fedora repositories because that's just to cover their stuff legally, that sort of thing. But one of the biggest advantages for users of Fedora Flatpaks is that the Flatpaks from Fedora use a single runtime, so you wind up saving disk space, whereas Flatpaks from the Flathub can result in having to store multiple runtimes, and each of these runtimes are pretty big, so it takes up a lot of storage. Later on in the discussion, the original poster also came back with something that I thought was pretty interesting related to the sandboxing of Flatpaks and also the runtimes, because speaking of runtimes, says that OBS Studio is not a particularly good example because in addition to being unsandboxed, it also notably depends on an end-of-life runtime or EOL runtime that no longer receives security updates. In this particular case, I would actually prefer to install the Fedora RPM version of this app. So looking on the Flathub for the OBS project, you'll see that the available architectures are x86-64 only. So if you were an ARM user, you wouldn't be able to get that. Theoretically, with the Fedora Flatpak, you could. I don't know. I have not tested that. And also other architectures. So there's a reason for that. And in looking into that runtime thing, you can see that the latest version of the manifest, which is listed here when you go to links, this was built about a month ago. You go to the manifest, and this will take you to the section here. It won't tell you exactly because there's a lot more to dig into. You got to go to a particular thing right here. This is the JSON file. When you go into the JSON file, you will see that it says runtime is based on KDE platform and the runtime version is 6.6. And when you look on the Flatpak KDE runtime GitLab, you see that they have marked 6.6 as end of life because they currently have 6.7 and 6.8 developed. Now, For those who don't know, the KDE runtimes are maintained for about a year, somewhere between 10 to 12 months, and the 6.6 reached the end of life 9 months ago. This discussion continues on for a lot, and then eventually there's a bit of a heated discussion, a heated debate about whether someone's packaging and maintainership is terrible or not. So because of that, there was a response from Joel later saying on February 12th, since it's clear that Fedora does not have any interest in a rational discussion at this point and has decided to resort to name calling, we are now considering the Fedora Flatpaks distribution of OBS Studio a hostile fork. This is a formal request to remove all of our branding, including but not limited to our name, our logo, any additional IP belonging to the OBS project from your distribution. Failure to comply may result in further legal action taken. We expect a response within the next 7 business days by Friday, February 21st, 2025. Based on this threat of legal action, the packager of the RPM version of OBS Studio has requested that the removal of the Flatpak for OBS be done, and that has been initiated. Because of this, Joel has then responded, a formal request from a Fedora package maintainer was made here to remove the package. We consider this movement in the right direction. So it's clear that this was a little bit of a mess, but it brings up some interesting questions. I've seen people talk about why does Fedora Flatpaks exist? Why is it set as priority and all this sort of stuff? So we've already talked about why it exists, but I think there's some other interesting questions to talk about. So one of the questions I think is pretty interesting is the whole Flatpak repository option that you have as the format offers. So a lot of people are talking about, why does Fedora Flatpak exist? And one of the reasons I think this is interesting is that when the Flatpak versus Snaps debate happens, a lot of people seem to promote Flatpak over Snaps because of the open backend for repositories, whereas Snaps has a proprietary server structure. And this is a fair point. I do think that that is a very fair point to say why Flatpak is better. However, so Flatpak offers the ability to have multiple repositories, and that's a good thing for the format. But when a project decides to use that multiple repository thing, that becomes a problem somehow. So it's good that it exists, but you don't want anyone to ever use it. What's the point of it working then? Because the same result it's the same exact result if Snaps have only one repository, the Flathub has only one repository. What's the difference here? It seems like you either it's either okay or it isn't. You could argue that some Flatpaks should be deemed better from, based on the user experience. So give access to the Flathub version, that sort of thing. But if you're saying that this whole thing shouldn't exist, seems kind of weird because there are examples where it's better for the user. And we already talked about why they exist, because they have more architecture options. There's only one runtime, and etc. So I just find it a little weird that whole debate about why it exists or not. Now, I use the RPM for OBS, and that's because, well, I need particular plugins, and they don't seem to work on the Flatpak, or at least I haven't been able to get them to work on the Flatpak. So that's why I use the RPM instead. I do think that it's cool that OBS maintains their own Flatpak, and I do think Flatpaks in general are cool, and maybe I'll make a video about, why these universal formats exist and all that sort of stuff. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to know information about that. But for me, the RPM is the better experience. This whole situation highlights another challenge in the Linux ecosystem. When everyone has the freedom to package software in their own way, things can sometimes get messy. OBS wanted to maintain control over its software, understandably. Fedora wanted to provide a consistent experience for its users, understandably. And somewhere in the middle, things got out of hand. And I do think it's interesting because there are some arguments to say that the Flathub version of Flatpak needs to be updated with the runtime. Then there's other people saying that Fedora Flatpaks having issues causing a thing with OBS users, thinking that they have the official Flatpak when they actually have a third-party downstream version. I do think there is something to think about there with the Fedora team making some kind of indicator or label saying Fedora Flatpak in there. I think that would be really good for like the GNOME software and the Discover stores to display that. And then also, I think overall, this is a very interesting topic just in the surface of it. But at the same time, it's kind of a nothing burger because before I even made this video, everything was solved and they addressed the stuff. So they're avoiding there's no legal action being taken. If you like this video and want to get more from my channel, be sure to subscribe. And of course, click that like button to let the YouTube algorithm, the almighty algorithm, know that you appreciate my content so more people can see this video, and I'd appreciate that. And also, if you'd like to check out some more video from my channel, you can check out this one, which YouTube's algorithm says that you'd like. I don't know what it is because this is the best for the viewer type of thing, so hopefully it's a good one and not a terrible video. I don't make terrible videos. Never mind, it's a great one. Check it out.